Yeah. Yeah.
Good afternoon, welcome. Thank you for joining us. This is the Marion City Council work session for the Community Playmaker Community of the Year, Tuesday, August 6th. First on our agenda is a presentation for Medco's capital campaign. Ryan, or what were you going to introduce, Mark? Okay.
We're going to introduce Mark Sackman, who's part of Team Marion. He's going to talk about the campaign.
Welcome, Mark.
Perfect. I heard we're on record, so I probably shouldn't start with this side team, this side Marion. So, first of all, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate the chance to come in and talk to you a little bit about Medco. But I also want to thank you really for all your support over the years and the partnership and collaboration that we have. That Team Marion concept is more than just a concept. It is truly authentic. Between the city, Medco, the chamber, and Uptown, we're all going in the same direction, working together and working collaboratively. And as a matter of fact, you have a hard copy of our prospectus in front of you, and we had one emailed to you this morning. But before we even completed this document, I had the mayor look it over, I had Jill look it over, and I had Ryan look it over, because I wanted to make sure that we were all, again, staying in our lanes, but working collaboratively. So this document is based on feedback that I received from some of our larger investors and businesses and then community people that we work with. But we are launching a 5-year capital campaign that'll take us from January 2025 to December 2029. And as I've told our other investors that I've been meeting with, the reason we're doing that is it allows us to have the ability to make long-term strategic plans and really decide what are the best options and alternatives and strategies going forward. And then the advantage to organizations such as yourselves is now you can bake that into your budgets. So we're not coming and knocking on your door every year or two saying, hey, we could use a little bit more capital to get a few more things done. So I'm going to walk you through this as briefly as I can, but if you want to stop me and ask questions, please do. Our goal, just to kind of tee it up a little bit, our goal is to raise $3.5 million to carry us over that 5-year time period. So an annual budget of about $700,000. So far, I've made calls on a little over 30 current investors, 1 new investor, and the response has been phenomenal. Of those, we've received not quite 25 back, and we're seeing 67% increases in investments in Medco coming from our investors. So I think that speaks highly of not just us as an organization, but the direction this community is going, because people see the vibe and what's happening here and really want to get on board. And obviously the city and the council has a lot to do with that. So I've laid out the perspectives, given you a little bit of background, but one of the things that we want to tee it up with are what are some of the challenges that we need to address in the community? And my biggest concern, and I mean this very complimentary, is that we all don't sit around thumping our chest talking about how great we are, because there's such a vibe going on in Marion right now that sometimes it's easy for us to sit around and drink our own Kool-Aid. But really, we've got to keep the pedal to the metal and keep moving forward and keep that momentum going as we plan things. Another thing that we need to be really thinking about is how do we get key properties in what I term friendly hands? And I'll use an example. We have a Pizza Hut right on the edge of Uptown. Great restaurant. We love them in Marion. Is that the best location for them? And is that the best facility for them? They're carry out only, delivery. Do they need that full service restaurant? Is there an opportunity to put them in a more appropriate space and get that property in friendly hands for further development? So those are just a few examples of things that we need to be addressing. So as we walk through this, the first part of the 5-year plan is what I call community development. And when I started economic development 30 years ago, You used to bring in the employers. So when I was a priority one in Cedar Rapids, we brought in Toyota Financial Services, Nordstrom Direct, what's now International Paper, the paper mill, Red Star Yeast, Jay Rettenmeyer and Son. Then the people would follow, and then the amenities, retail and recreational assets would follow after that. Now it's just the opposite. You better have those assets and amenities to attract the people, which then attract the employers or allow existing employers to continue growing. So we're going to be very strategic about opportunities in attracting amenities and assets to the area, working again collaboratively with Uptown, the Chamber, and the City of Marion. Our role will be going out and finding hotelers, for example. We're about 3 or 4 hotels short in Marion. We're hearing that routinely. We're going to proactively go out and meet with those hotelers, get them to want to come into this community, and then bring our partners in play, the city, chamber, Uptown, to really sell them on why they need to be in Marion. We're going to do the same thing with restaurants. If there's cool restaurants in Dubuque that we want in Marion, let's go talk to them. We did it when I was at Greater Dubuque. We went across the river and talked to Vinnie Vanucci's and Galena and said, you need to be in Dubuque. They were. We did the same thing with Barrel House in the Quad Cities. They came to Dubuque and now it's coming this direction. So we're going to have those types of conversations, but then really lean on our partners to help with those types of things. And then another area with community development, and I really need to applaud Kim Downs with this, that's the entry-level housing. So when I first went and met with some of our local leaders and industry, they said, Mark, I'm paying my employees 25 to 30 bucks an hour. Where are they going to find an owner-occupied house for a family of 4? All the apartments that we have in Uptown are really awesome, but if they want to own, how do we go about doing that? You know, the market's pretty much taking care of where the Linn-Mar district is, but we have some older housing stock that can be redeveloped on what I'll term as the south side of Marion. So we need to take advantage of that opportunity, because where else in a community can you have that type of housing stock where there is no crime? You have walkability to Uptown. You have walkability to brand new schools. You have walkability to 2 of the nicest and largest parks in Marion with Hannah and Thomas Park, and a trail going through it. So we've done a lot of things to move that forward. And now Kim is really taking leadership on that. So we really appreciate that. Business attraction, that's an area that we want to also hone in on and be very strategic, but also be proactive. In the past, I feel as if Medco's been more responsive. If an opportunity presents itself, we respond to that opportunity. What we want to do is proactively go after target industries and really engage them with all the cool things that are happening in Marion. So I'm going to give you an example. We're going to be a little bit of a niche player, but we've got great stories to tell. Sub-Zero, that is building in Cedar Rapids, is building there for a specific reason. They needed 40 acres. They wanted to be visible from I-380. They wanted the transportation routes I-380. They wanted to bring employers from the north and the south end of the corridor. And quite frankly, I think they probably wanted to bring a few from the Amana colonies with Whirlpool as well. That probably isn't in our wheelhouse, but what is in our wheelhouse would be a plastic component supplier for Sub-Zero. So those are the types of industries we're going to go after and be very strategic about that. We've also talked about the baking industry. We have assets in this market that no one else has. Red Star Yeast in Cedar Rapids makes 40% of all the yeast used in North America. They have a sister plant in Cedar Rapids that does bakery mixes. AB Maori does sweet good bakery mixes. In Marion, we have Marion Processing that does mixing equipment, Up Electric that does the motors for all these. We've got a story to tell. And if you come to Marion, you can be within 5-hour drive of 42 million people. So we want to be very, very aggressive in going after those types of companies. And that's where an area that I think we're short. I'd love to bring in another team member for Medco that's going to focus primarily on new business attraction. We also have to really continue to foster that relationship with IEDA. So a great example is we get the opportunity to travel with them. They were in Kansas City at the Pet Food Forum in May, which is an industry that makes sense for us. And they'd asked if we would go and collaborate with them and participate in that trade show. And unfortunately, we didn't have the bandwidth from a staffing perspective, nor financially did we have the ability to do that. But we have to have that relationship with IEDA so they think of Marion first and foremost when they're thinking about cool communities that they want to attract companies to. So that's an area that we're going to focus on with business attraction. BRE, business retention and expansion. We've actually branded our product. We call it business voice calls. We call in a business, they have a voice, and now we have a call to action to respond to their needs. In the past, it'd been more of, I have to make my 25 existing business calls quarterly. Well, now it is, what's the outcome of those opportunities? So let's focus on outcome, projects, and solutions for employers. So Brady Quinn, who runs that portion of our group, went and met with one of our local employers, and they had told him that they'd been hiring a significant number of people over the last couple of years. The question was asked, do you have a contract in place with Kirkwood for the Iowa New Jobs Training Program? They didn't know. Well, Brady went back to Kirkwood. Long story short, they dug up a contract that they can work off now. This could be several hundreds of thousands of dollars to this company. That's an outcome that Brady focused on, and that's what we want to drive is outcomes and solutions. So the other thing we want to do with our BRE is an extension of calling on not just the local operation, but the headquarter companies that have operations in Marion, but are headquartered elsewhere. So perfect example, Consumer Supply. Well, they're headquartered in South Dakota. We need to be talking to those audiences in South Dakota about everything that's happening in Marion, because if they're going to grow, that decision is going to be made in South Dakota, not here. So a great example that I used when I was at Greater Dubuque Development Corporation, I called on Hormel, said, hey, what are we doing right as a community? What are we doing wrong? How can we make you more profitable? And oh, by the way, if you're looking at expanding, we'd love to have you do it in Dubuque. And their response is, we have two projects. One we think you can compete for, one we don't think you have any chance whatsoever, but you can take a run at it. The first one was bacon bits. Their bacon bits were being outsourced. They hired another company. They put the Hormel label on it. They wanted to bring that in-house. And they said, we'll let you compete with our plant in Nebraska and our plant in Minnesota. And the other one was a Spam line. But it's to serve the Pacific Rim or the Asian markets. And they were looking at the Philippines and Brazil. And they said, if you want to take a run at it, God bless you. Long story short, we got both of those projects in Dubuque. After that, we went to them and said, well, who makes that cool Spam can for you guys? Well, that's a company out of Nebraska. Long story short, they just built a facility next to the Hormel plant. That's how those headquarter calls are important. So all this proactive type of activity, there's costs associated with that. There's travel expenses and things of that nature to be more engaged with those large employers and assisting our existing companies to expand and grow. The next is workforce development. And we work very closely with the Economic Alliance on workforce recruitment and really do a good job of that. But we really do a good job, and Emily Russ with our team leads this, and that's workforce development, primarily working with K through 12. And with that, we work with bringing in employers to talk to students about job shadows, apprenticeships, internships, having those those children also go to the employers, and the employers talk to them about, this is what we do as an organization. If you're interested in this type of work going forward, these are the skill sets that are going to be required, or the educational background you're going to need. So we're going to continue to do that. But the other thing we really want to do, and that's a pipeline for a workforce. So let's use the example that I'm a metal fabricator, and I'm looking for welders and CNC operators. We have Kirkwood Community College does a phenomenal job. How many students are they kicking out annually out of those programs? Let's say it's 25. Well, now we want to go in a 60-mile radius of Marion and talk to Marshalltown Community College, Muscatine Community College, Hawkeye Tech, NICC, Clinton Community College. Now, collectively, within an hour's drive, what's the pipeline? It may be 150 to 200 employees. Now we can go to our existing employers and say, this is your pipeline, and we'll take you to those institutions to help you attract them to the area. We can also use that when we're trying to attract a new employer to the area. You come to Marion, and we've got access to a pipeline. And this is where community development really fits in as well. And I don't mean this to be disparaging towards our other communities, but if you had a choice to live in Marion Muscatine, Marshalltown, Clinton, or Waterloo, which one do you think you're going to choose? Because we got a cool vibe and things happening. So that's how you build on all those types of things. And then from a marketing standpoint, obviously we want to redo our website. Our website is not really geared towards what we want to do or what employers or industry wants to see, and we want to focus on that. That pipeline, for example, that needs to be on our website. The niche industries that we're going after and all those assets that I talked about, that needs to be on our website. We also want to take it a step further. You know, we do a phenomenal job of communicating all the cool things that are happening in Marion internally. We want to take that a step further. How do we get that out more regionally or even statewide or across the Midwest? So we have a meeting next week. It's the city, the chamber, and ourselves as Team Marion to sit down with the Quarter Business Journal and ask them, how can we feed you content that you can publish so that you can help spread the word for all the cool things happening in Marion? They also, the Quad Cities Business Journal. Let's get the information in that. Then also focusing on trade journals of the industries that we're targeting and getting editorials into those different publications. So that's an area of focus. And then investor relations, we've done our annual meeting. We pumped the brakes this year because we wanted to get through the capital campaign, but we do the bus tours. If you haven't done it yet, I would love to have you participate this year. It's September 12th, and we're actually doing 2 buses, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. The mayor's helping us with a welcome. And the whole process with this bus tour is, here's some things that have happened in Marion, but also this is the direction we're going. It's a Medco-led event, but it's truly a Team Marion process. We're going to try to do a little bit more breakfast briefings where it's a little bit more informal, getting a smaller group engaged and talking to them about what kind of needs that they have. And then I'm trying to make a commitment of meeting with each one of our investors at least once a year to have face-to-face interaction and dialogue with them. So that's the overall vision. That's the overall plan. But then we also have a budgetary summary on how we plan on using those $3.5 million over that 5-year period. So it's broken out based on business unit. And we've taken those business units, and that's actually how our budget's set up now. So we can follow if we're having success based on the amount of dollars we're putting into each individual business unit. The next page is what we refer to as our measurables. And I want to call them measurables instead of goals because the first 5 Medco, we're going to have our fingerprints on, but the next 6 are really more community outcomes of a strong, healthy economy. So we want to have the completion of 25 new or remodeled houses in the core neighborhoods that we've talked about, creation of 300 new primary sector jobs, $250 million in construction investment, construction of 5 new or expanded industrial warehouse or office projects, construction or remodeling of 10 commercial or retail properties. So those are the ones that Medco is going to be engaged in. The next 6 or more outcomes of that: increasing the household median income, increasing the per capita income, growing the population in Marion, increasing Marion's annual local option sales tax revenue, which means not being reliant on property taxes, increasing Marion's annual hotel motel tax revenue, and then increasing the entire valuation of the community. So those are outcomes of a healthy, strong economy. The last page on this is an economic impact analysis that we had put together. So if we create, and I shouldn't say we, if employers create 300 primary new jobs at $29 an hour, the total direct payroll is over $18 million. Those 300 new jobs will create 227 indirect jobs, bank tellers, restaurants, anything that's here to support our population. Those 527 jobs will now have an annual payroll of over $25 million. Then it goes into disposable income of about $15 million. But then if you're a bank, your bank impact is new net deposits annually of $2.2 million. So it truly is creating a stronger, more vibrant economy. So I really whipped through that pretty quickly. Any questions before I make the official ask? Thoughts,
Questions
ideas?
for Mark? Go ahead.
Just looking at the measurables, just curiosity, when we talk about creation of direct 300 new jobs, are there projections for like what industries those jobs would be coming from or what our hopes are?
Yeah, that's what we're working on, but it could be those plastic component manufacturers for Sub-Zero.
Oh,
It
that
could
makes sense.
be the bakery. What we want to focus on are companies that don't come in and compete with our existing employers, but provide an opportunity for either being a supplier to or a customer of our existing employers.
Okay, thank you.
Questions? Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, so Mark, the middle item, you talked about workforce development
Mhm.
and the workforce to me is one of the most critical things. I mean, all the surveys that you guys have been doing over the last 5 to 10 years, that's been at the top,
Absolutely,
almost nationwide, right?
absolutely.
Locally and nationwide. So other statistics to go along with that is our trades are going to be way short of whether it's a carpenter, pipe fitter, machinist. All the trades are basically retiring
Mhm.
and there's huge gaps. And then the other statistic is basically when you come out of high school, most of the jobs going forward, only 1/3 of the jobs need a 4-year degree. So that combined leads me to believe that what we do and the impact that we can have occurs at the high school level. And getting people to understand that trades are very well-paying jobs, good careers.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, you talked about Emily working in that area, but how are we doing that? And do we need to be doing more? Because we're gonna need those people coming out of high school to be into those trades to help all of these companies grow and support each other.
Great question, Steve. First of all, that 60-mile radius of the community colleges, that's an area. But when you're talking about the high school level, the mayor, Ryan, and I had the opportunity of going and meeting with the local trade unions. And we presented to them about all the cool things that are happening in Marion. And now we have a level of engagement where we're actually working with the head of the electrical union, carpenter union, plumbers and pipe fitters union, and who's the others? The general labor. And we want to work with them to get into the high schools to talk to the students more about here are opportunities with employment going forward. They're more engaged in the community than I've ever seen them before. We had a housing discussion. 5 or 6 of them showed up in full support of how they want to assist us with that. So that's a great question, but that's an area you're absolutely right. We need to do a better job of getting that, not just to the students, but probably to the parents as well.
Well, I think the other thing I saw when I was at Vector is the other people you really need to get to are the counselors. Because back when I was at
Absolutely.
Vector, the counselors would bring people through there on tours, the high school kids, and they were pushing 4-year degrees left and right. And I think if they continue to do that, the kids are getting misdirected. So you not only got to get to the kids, I think you really got to make sure the counselors are really in tune with what the direction is needed and what jobs are out there, because they should not be guiding every kid and saying you need a 4-year degree. If they do that, they're not doing their job in the most effective manner for the students or the community.
You're absolutely spot on. And I've seen it firsthand. Out of our 4 kids, one of ours went the military route. And we said, we're going to allow you to do this if you get a skill. He's a welder. As soon as the day he got out, he had a job just like that. And he's doing very well for himself. So I couldn't agree more. That's an area that we need to continue to address and probably push more assets in that direction.
I'd like to see that.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Go ahead.
Mark, first, I really appreciate this plan being presented to us. What it expresses, in my opinion, is there is a lot of opportunity.
Absolutely.
There is a great spectrum of endeavor that would be before Medco over the next 5 years. And so I guess just the general thing, I think you mentioned that perhaps for business attraction, you may find yourself in a position where additional resource would be needed for that. And I think that's probably pretty highly specialized.
Yeah.
Which I guess generally this plan just suggests to me is as you have incremental success in each of these strategic areas, you're probably going to also be thinking about in terms of an organizational growth profile over time. And I just think we need to have that mindset. If you do good things, you're going to need more resources. But I guess a specific question, and it does relate to business attraction. You gave the Sub-Zero example where really Sub-Zero is out of our wheelhouse, but a supplier to Sub-Zero might be. How do you go about identifying the right industry niche to, is it the big business drives us to go find the suppliers, or do we try to already understand the supplier world and then help that be a promotion to the bigger businesses that might be on a regional basis? What's the dynamic there?
The answer to that question, Grant, is yes. No, and
Okay.
I'm being a little facetious, but first of all, we have to have a relationship with Sub-Zero and talk to them about their supplier base and who they need closer to them, and then go out and get them and bring them here. But it also is just the opposite. Who are suppliers that we have here that we can attract other industry to? And we have the databases to a lot of those types of industries that we can go directly to them and have those conversations. What sets us apart from the competition? What are the assets that we have that others don't have? And if you're looking to serve the Midwest market, Marion, Iowa is an excellent location because you're 5 hours from Chicago, Milwaukee, Minneapolis, Kansas City, St. Louis, Omaha. We can go on and on. So there is an asset that we have just from a geographic standpoint. Now we have to pull in those assets from a supplier or a customer base standpoint as well.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
As you know, I'm very supportive of what you are doing and have been doing and your knowledge to bring all this, and appreciate that you have put together all of your past experiences in this industry, and we are rewarded with that in Marion in
Thank you.
this plan and everything else. So thank you for that. This is just a quick question as I read through this, because I agree with a lot of this, the friendly hands piece of that, and we've done that in the past, and I know we're not going to get into the details of how it sounds easier than it is, but there's a whole piece that has to happen to make that happen. Curious, and it's just been because of some other conversations recently with young folks, but when we're talking about challenges in our community about hiring talent they need, where does that fit in? Is this the entry level? Is it they don't stay when they're there? I know this is a whole churning of space, but I was just curious if there's an identified target there.
It goes back to what Steve said. It really is that skilled workforce.
Okay.
Or that workforce that needs a specific degree program, engineering, accounting, things of that nature, welders, whatever they may be, specific assemblers, technicians, those types of things. Yeah, and it's not, as we talked about earlier, it's not a Marion issue. This is certainly a North American issue, if not a global issue. If we get ahead of that curve and we're more strategic about it, I think it's really going to pay off. And part of that is then the housing. And again, we've done a phenomenal job in this community with all the cool uptown apartments and apartments throughout the community. But if it's owner occupied, that's an area we need to really hone in on as well.
Interesting. And this is just a side note. When you bring that up, I just had a conversation with a friend of mine whose son is trying to get into the trades, and he's been on a waiting list with electrical. He went to college, did not like it. His dad is a union welder. He's been waiting for a call from the union. He's on their list, and he's been waiting for 2 months, and he's been calling them. So I find it interesting, and they're tied in with union folks. So
Yeah.
got on a part-time job, then rained was whole pan, whatever. But so I always find it interesting, and I'm glad you all are directing and talking directly with the unions, because sometimes you hear that side of it and you're like, I thought we had a shortage and we're trying to get people in here. And now there's people waiting to get in here and they're not receiving the calls. So like, where are those disconnects? We've all lived through that. And that's just one instance, but that's why I'm glad you all are working directly with.
And that
unions.
is great insight. It's similar to some of our large employers. And when I say ours, that'd be more the metro area, where it's a 2-month process to go through their hiring process. How do we streamline these things?
Right.
How do we get those connectivities together so we can get a young student that wants to get into the electrical industry, we can get them engaged and they can get moving forward more quickly.
Before we lose them to somewhere else, because the
Exactly.
process is too.
Exactly.
So thanks for all you're doing on that.
Well, thank you. And again, it's a collaborative effort. That Team Marion started with the mayor and it's rippled throughout the community. And I heard it today. I was at a conference in downtown Cedar Rapids and people were walking up to me. What's happening in Marion is so cool. And the way you're doing things is so cool. So we're ahead of the game when it comes to the collaborative atmosphere that we have here.
Thanks, Mark. We really appreciate we don't make any secret of it. We appreciate the partnership and really value what Medco has brought to the community and to our team. And we've figured out that when we work together and we're all going in the same direction, we get a lot more accomplished
Exactly.
than in any other city our size. So I really appreciate that. I appreciate this because, you know, it
Sure.
lays out the plan. The things that resonate with me most are the not becoming complacent. And I think, you know, we all know that we're on a roll, but the reality still is that we are the second largest city in a bigger, you know, next to a big city. And investors still, I think, a lot of times think perception-wise that the opportunity is in the bigger city and that they're going to have, you know, more opportunity in the bigger city. So we can't be complacent. We have to take that extra step and make the extra effort to really show them why the opportunity is here. We can't just assume,
Mhm.
you know, that people see it, that people, realize it, that we have to constantly be reminding them and selling them on why Marion is a good option. And the proactive nature of what you're talking about, you know, everybody knows that I'm all about the extra effort and making that extra step, taking that extra step, because that's where success lies. And
Mhm.
you've been doing this for 30 years, so you know that you have to, you try many times to get one project to work, and that's just part of how it works. You know, you're competing with lots of different communities for projects and for development. And, you know, it takes a lot of effort and a lot of tries. So I like the proactive nature and the going after projects proactively. And so, again, thank you for being here and explaining this to us. Now go ahead and make your ask.
Well,
Oh, Ryan, you have something first? Oh,
you covered it. Great. Well, our ask is, you have been providing funding or investment, and I want it to be viewed as an investment, not a dues, not a donation, not a contribution. It should be an investment. You should see a return on this investment at $140,000 annually, which is our largest investor. Our request is $160,000 annually, starting January 2025, taking us through December of 2029. So that 5-year period. So we would love to have you consider that. If you have any questions, reach out to me. If you want to sit down and have a cup of coffee and chat some more, I'm happy to do that. But we think that you will definitely see with the vibe that we already have, the momentum we already have, I think you're going to see a better return on that investment if we can be more proactive.
okay, thank you. And just on a personal note, thank you for very quickly becoming a champion for Team Marion. I mean, you really embody that, and you've taken it on in a very sincere way, and you've become a champion for the team.
Absolutely.
And it's noticed, and I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, because it's not about credit. It's about getting it done.
Yeah.
And collectively, we can get so much more done.
Yeah.
So, and thank you for starting that atmosphere of Team Marion. You created that awareness, that thought, and it's rippling through the community now. So very much appreciated.
Okay, anything else for Mark?
Well, again, thank you for your time. Take care.
All right, next is our budget discussion with Leanne.
Well, I think it's fair to say with what I'm going to present, Mark's presentation couldn't have been more timely because of the results of what that investment would definitely make these numbers that I will show today more positive. So today we continue in our series of discussion as we work towards the development of the fiscal year 26 budget. We're going to cover the 5-year financial models, and the strategic plan update, just a note, is being received and filed with your council packet and is marked for discussion tonight if council has any questions on that. And then our next meeting is covering the fiscal year 23-24 preliminary report. I do ask that questions regarding that specific year wait and be answered at the next meeting. I mean, for instance, you may have noticed when you were looking in the general fund model that the general fund in totality saw an increase in fund balance of 3.5 million. We're going to explain that at the next meeting. So the goal for today is to focus on that 5-year projection. So looking at the general fund, I'm going to keep all of these high level. The general fund model includes all general funds. This includes the equipment reserve fund, the hotel motel funds, and also the tax stabilization fund, in addition to the general fund operating fund. When I gave this presentation a year ago, you might recall the reserve dropped below 25% in fiscal year 26. And then by fiscal year 28, the fund in totality went negative. Much progress has been made as we've continued to work on several strategies, some of which are the franchise fee increase that we did, revamping our fee schedule, and several reorganizations as we've seen vacancies in positions. Last year, the model was built with 2% growth as we acclimated to the House File 718 bill. Changes since that last version provided during the budget year. So during the budget year, we had adjusted for House File 718, include putting in the adopted budget for fiscal year 25 and the actuals for fiscal year 24. So just, for presentation purposes, see if the pointer actually works. That 21% would drop us below our reserve requirement of 25%. And the fund balance, as you can see here, is not negative. And as you're looking at this ending fund balance, this is the ending balance of all of the general fund that I was talking about. So that's including the hotel motel and the tax stabilization fund. This unrestricted fund balance number is your operating fund for that reserve percentage. Any questions specifically on that? For those that prefer a visual, as I said, the model currently suggests the fund will dip below the reserve in fiscal year 28 and continue to decline into fiscal year 29. The navy blue color is the balance in the fund. The gold is the reserve requirement. And we also built into this model the changes made by Senate Study Bill 3207, which I'm just about to provide more detail on. So this actually was a visual that Ryan asked that we create as it related to comparing the House File 718 with the changes they made this last spring with Senate Study Bill 3207. The major change they made was adding that 1% limit, thinking that going from the no limit, which no limit basically means your limit is $8.10 on your general fund levy. As you apply that 2% limit, it starts ratcheting down, and 3% limit ratchets down even further. So now they've decided, okay, it's too drastic to go from no limit to a 2% limit. We're gonna put in this 1% limit, but now instead of it being at 3%, we're gonna take it back to 2.75%. Now, this doesn't mean a whole lot to you looking at the screen, and when I'm saying growth, I'm meaning taxable growth when you're looking at the numbers across here. When you're looking at that limit number, that's 2%, 3%, that's actually just part of what goes into the calculation. I wouldn't look at that as anything other than just prescribed in the calculation that is done. Because as you can see, we ran several different scenarios looking in fiscal year 26. What if we grew by 2% in taxable valuation? What if we grew by 3? 3.5 is what we have in the model. What if we grew by 4? What if we grew by 5? And then I kind of boxed a couple of these areas because you can see that the change in tax 2% growth is 466,000. If you grow by 3% growth, you'd like to think that you would receive more in tax revenue. You actually receive less than you would if you'd grown by 2%. And again, as you enter that next tier, it's the same situation, 3.5% growth, you're receiving 407,000 increase in tax. You increase by 4%, it's 322. And that's why I said, when it comes to that limit, don't just think, 1%, 2%, 3%, because 2% growth equals 2.84% growth, 3% growth equals 1.98% growth, and so forth. So it's a really confusing calculation. We always look at it again, and then have to double check the math. So what does that look like if we plug in our assumptions of 3.5 and then 5 on an assessment year and then a 3.5% on a non-assessment year? We're looking at this. Pause for just a second so everyone can kind of peek at it. So I would also note the model assumes the city goes to a maximum of $8.10. I don't know how many people would like to jump from the 779 to 810, but we generally try not to do shocks in levy rates. But as Ryan always loves to point out to me, keep in mind, there's a rollback. And the calculation is not so simple as just focusing on the levy rate, even though that is what this math calculation actually does. So even with the growth, Marion is looking at a negative net change in fund balance in the out years. As such, our work continues. We continue to do zero-based budgeting. We continue to review our fines and fees. We're continuing to evaluate vacant positions. This year, especially, we're going to be really starting to look at our service deliveries, see if there's alternatives or ways to collaborate with other organizations. And then also we have partnered with Cost Advisory Services to do a cost allocation model to make sure the utility funds are paying their fair share of those shared services. It was a lot to digest. Any questions before I move on to road use?
Questions? Go ahead, Steve.
Leanne, I've got a couple. First of all, in 28-29, when you went to the 810 levy rate, I wasn't sure if we got to that by the growth numbers or we got to that because the legislative maybe had a sunset clause or something like that that allowed things to go back to the 810. So did we get to the 810 because of growth or something else?
The 810 levy, the limitation calculation falls off in fiscal year 28-29.
Okay, that's what I was
It could
wondering.
go up to 810 after that timeline, assuming that no laws pass between now and then.
And if I can jump onto
Yeah.
that, this is for illustrative purposes only. As the council knows, and I want to share for the public that when we go through our budgeting process, the expenses that our departments need to provide the services, that gets into the calculation that will spit out the ending tax rate.
Right.
So we in Marion do the zero-based budgeting to budget for what we need. So our team has done a marvelous job of navigating that system. I think the state has inquired about our process a couple of times. But this is for illustrative purposes, and given our process, it's unlikely that we would jump automatically to the 810 unless there is a need as directed by city council. So that's an important part to understand.
Okay, then go back to the goal, the target of a 25% unrestricted cash balance or cash reserve. So that's an internal goal that we have. There's nothing required by state. That's just something that we have set internally. Is that
Not
correct?
required by state. It's in our financial policy. It's a best practice.
Right.
And it definitely impacts our bond rating.
Yeah, all of this collectively, there's other costs associated with this. Once we hit in 27, 28, if we really get to that 21% level in 16, there's other ramifications. Any bonds you issue are now going to have higher cost and you're not going to be, your bond rating is going to go lower. And so you got all those things tangential to what may happen because of all of that. So I mean, that talks about the workload that we've got in front of us. One other thing, and when we talk about the expenses, what kind of assumptions were built into that for wage adjustments and new employees? What did you include in there?
Right now, the model assumes 5% inflation on expenses. And I'm glad you pointed that out, Steve. That is an area where we really can spend more time developing the model so that it's not just a flat 5%. But right now, the model assumed a 5% across all of the expenses.
Oh, yeah, okay. So it hasn't been, this model is not drilling down
It's not.
into some of the different categories and making different assumptions by some of the different expense categories. You're just doing an overall.
It's not fully baked yet. We've layered in different pieces every year. This
Okay.
past year, we layered in the capital and the asset replacements.
Yeah, fine.
Pointed out is definitely an area.
That tells me
opportunity.
that's an area for improvement that we're gonna have to be doing pretty
Yes.
quickly. I'd say in a year from now, that area for the expense side needs to be drilled down at some lower levels so that we can make sure we can project those more accurately than just putting on an overall 5% increase. So to me, this information is fantastic. You know, when I started on city council, we had no concept of any of this, and now we're getting it on an annual basis. So to me, this is fantastic stuff. So anyway, appreciate it. Thank you. Anyone else?
So similarly, that road use fund ending fund balance includes more than just the road use fund. It includes the replacement fund, the debt service reserve fund. The road use model was updated to include fiscal year 24 actuals. Just wanted to note a change in cash of 1.6 million in fund balance and the fiscal year 25 adopted budget. Revenues were updated to include the latest Iowa Department of Transportation projections. The reserve percentage, as you can see at the bottom of the screen, is very strong. However, I would say it is a bit deceiving as we continue to replace equipment. We will need a salt building out at the public service facility. And we do have a couple debts on the facility, public service facility, that are being paid out of the road use fund. One of them is a 20-year amortized with a 10-year balloon. So as we add that fiscal year 29-30, we expect that fund balance to go down and by quite a bit. And then the other, just want to point out the other bond that we have for the public service facility is currently at interest only through 2030 as well. These are much briefer with these funds. Any questions on road use? So moving on to sanitary sewer, similarly, the ending fund balance includes the public service facility project, which just wanted to know at the end of fiscal year 24 had a balance of 3.1 million, which helps explain this negative net change in fund balance for fiscal year 24-25. And the ending fund balance also includes the sanitary sewer replacement fund. Similar to road use, this does have a 2020 loan for the public service facility with a balloon in fiscal year 30, which is not yet included in the model, but we will be adding that in this budget season. We do anticipate a $24.5 million contribution to Cedar Rapids for treatment plant upgrades. So you will find in the model currently $1.74 million annually starting in fiscal year 28 is in the model. We're assuming with a stronger bond rating that Cedar Rapids will hopefully do the financing and that we'll be paying them an annual amount. That is yet to be determined as we do need to continue working with Cedar Rapids. Questions on sanitary sewer?
Go ahead. Is sanitary sewer the one where we've got a debt service covenant of 1.2?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, so I was looking at that and I'm looking at some of the, what that would look like out in 28, 29 and then 29, 30. So is that just projecting that we're going to be needing to make some changes as a result?
I'm not looking at the specific numbers you're looking at, but yes. We're gonna continue to refine it and it will be something that we can again bring up during budget because we will have, just like we did last year, another version of these models as we develop the budget.
Yeah, it shows we're in good shape for 2 years, and then all of a sudden, 27, 28, we start having a significant drop at that time. So obviously, we're gonna have to be talking about what we need to be doing to boost that up at that time, or at least ahead of time, so. Okay.
Solid waste, similarly, looking at the ending fund balance does include the solid waste replacement and solid waste portion of the public service facility. Again, I'm pointing out this number right here includes the public service facility, of which we still have $3.1 million. The implementation of automated collection, the purchase of a new truck due to growth, and replacement of horizontal grinder are what are contributing to both of these negative numbers. Similar to road use, the debt on the public service facility is interest only through 2030 on a bond and the balloon in 2030. We do need a recycling center building from solid waste, so that's not yet in the model, but something that we'll be looking at as we look towards this next budget year. And then just noting with automated collections, this fund will be monitored closely as we implement that to make sure we are hitting our loan covenants. And I mean, especially looking at tonnage and behavior shifts. Any questions on solid waste? So moving on to urban forest, this includes urban forest and urban forest replacement. There are 3 main initiatives going on right here. The big one really is the reforestation plan following the loss of trees due to the derecho. We do have a CDBG DR grant, Community Development Block Grant, disaster relief funds that is included in these budget numbers. And then we are building a reserve to replace equipment. So Seth will tell you that while that reserve percentage looks really healthy, the difference between these two funds, these two numbers, is the amount that we have in replacement right now. So we're trying to build that up and we're trying to replant trees everywhere. So I think we're going to see that trend change in the coming years. Questions on urban forest? Last but not least, stormwater management. This model will be further developed with the Stormwater Master Plan, which is expected to start in fiscal year 2025 and be phased over 3 years. Note the fund balance is projected to decrease over the next 5 years. Bear in mind that 100,000 of this each year is for that Stormwater Master Plan. And then we did have an escalator on our stormwater program. And as far as that reserve goes, just want to point out the fact that stormwater management is one of the only funds at this time that do not have a replacement fund or a reserve fund of any kind. That is definitely something we're going to be looking at in conjunction with that stormwater master plan and figuring out, okay, we know we need to establish one, but what level of reserve do we need to be putting into it? Any questions on stormwater? So as I mentioned, the models will be updated as we work on the fiscal year 26 budget. We typically include those in the budget packet that goes out for the budget work session. And then I'll see you next week as we, or not next week, next council meeting or work session meeting as we present on the fiscal year 23-24 report. Thank you.
Thanks, Leanne. Next item is a review of the agenda for Thursday. First item that's marked for discussion by staff is A7 on the second page of the agenda. Anything prior to that item that needs to be discussed? Okay, Rachel. A7.
Yes, this item was marked just to allow council time to ask questions. I know Councilmember Harper had a few that he submitted.
Yeah, I did. Actually, a couple of them think I want to have some more direct conversation on. But the first question I had regarding under the police department traffic cameras, I know we just made a application to have our system and our approach reapproved by the IDOT. So the question was, how fast will they ultimately, give us a response on that?
They asked for 90 days for either a thumbs up or a thumbs down from them. We had ours in the end of June. I think the official deadline was July 1st. So I'm thinking end of October or end of September, 1st of October. Until that time, we can continue to operate as we operated before.
Just sort of, this just came to my mind now, so sorry, but do we have any expectation that if they have a problem with our plan, they'd let us know before that due date or that response due date?
I don't know that. I know that when I sent the permit application in, it was a little over 600 pages. The next day, I got a phone call at 5 o'clock on Friday as I was getting ready to leave town saying, hey, pages 593 through 598 or whatever it was missing. So I had to come back in, call Ann Crow up on the phone to help me find where they were.
Sure.
So they flipped through them. I think the only thing that's going to be challenging for us or the unknown is they asked for, they wanted us to apply for a permit for every place that we're going to put the mobile unit, which is, I think is not in the actual state code that came out. It's almost like they're asking us to forecast where people are going to complain about speeders.
Yeah.
So we ended up, I think the total number we put in was 19 locations. I put in not just, 3514 29th Ave. I put in 29th Ave from Indian Creek to Highway 13. The only thing I can see them coming back, if they've got a problem with that, saying, hey, you have to narrow those down and get them smaller. If they do, this is the first time we've ever done it.
Sure.
I think DOT was probably as caught off guard as everybody else when this came about, and it kind of got dumped in their lap. And I would hope that if they wanted more information, that they would come back and ask rather than just deny.
If I can jump in, Chief, really quick, because this is a new regulation that the state implemented. We talked about it. We wanted to make sure that we were responsive to what the guidance we are hearing from IDOT. Well, we have shared this particular aspect with our lobbyists because in talking with other communities as well as our lobbyists, we do not believe that the legislative intent was to regulate the mobile unit on city roadways, but we wanted to make sure we got the application in, don't give any doubts, make sure we're continuing to be good partners with IDOT, but that is something that we will continue to evaluate.
So the great thing that I learned in this process is Mr. Barkalow jumped in on it real quick. And of course, you said initial application was 600 pages and then it went to 900 pages. The source, that 900 pages was a whole bunch of data that was figured out by IDOT under what program, Mike? What was it?
So that would have been under the TEAP, the Traffic Engineering Assistance Program.
So IDOT got data from themselves to support our application. I thought that was good. Okay, thank you. All right, anything else, Chief, on that one?
No, sir.
Okay, this second one I've got is regarding the EMS study, Chief. My curiosity was, how many respondents did we have?
Yeah, we had 3 proposals
Okay.
and we're in the process of reviewing those and we'll be bringing an update at a council meeting here very soon.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I was just curious how big that community of respondents was. So, okay, thanks. Central Plaza, Seth, I think is yours. I'm just curious where we're at with the chiller procurement, or Mr. Barkalow.
Yep. So I did reach out to Rennerneck. They're still anticipating a September ship date, so it should keep us on schedule. So.
Okay. All right. And receipt date for that equipment here on site?
It was still in November.
Okay.
we'll have a couple more times when Louis comes in and gives an update, like he did some time ago, but we'll wait till we get a little bit of progress on the site.
Okay. I did, just have a couple of questions on Alburnett Road and Draper Park, but that's best served by just some one-on-one discussion. So I'll just wait until next month when we take a look at those. So thanks, appreciate it.
Anyone else on any item? Or I guess on A7 for now and then, or anything before that? Okay, the next item that's marked is E4. So any questions on A8 through E3? All right, E4, Mike.
Yep, so E4 is a change order with Renner Neck. So as you may recall, this is a construction manager at risk with a guaranteed maximum price. But we are doing a change order because we're adding the speakers is the major change order that we're adding to that. So if you recall, we were trying to get a local vendor to design those speakers for us, and they're very customized based on what zones you want to set up, what speakers you want to use. And so we're using the contractors that are already under contract with Renner Neck to do the design to get those incorporated into the project so that when we're done, we have all of that. We're also working with the chamber to make sure, you know, there's a mic so that if there's an event and there's a lost child or something, they have access to that mic, things like that, different zones, depending on what's going on in the park. So it's just something we did not quite have ready yet when we bid the project. And so we're just adding it as part of the project.
I'm glad to see that that's being added. Any questions on that? Yeah, go ahead.
Mike, please pass along to Rendernick. I really appreciated that package of information detailing those change orders and the like, inclusive of their correspondence with stakeholders on that. It was just, I thought, good practice, so appreciate it.
Okay. All right, the next item is A2 on the last page. Anything to discuss prior to that item? A2, Rachel?
This ordinance contains two updates. The first is adding language relating to the discharge of air or BB or pellet guns that they're allowed on a person's own property at a target to prevent damage to another property. This would match language that we have in our code regarding bow and arrow hunting. Are there any questions on this section or this update?
Okay, which number are you on?
A2.
Oh, okay. Well,
The next section is regarding the operation of golf carts. We adjusted the language to make it clear that both a driver's license and disabilities identification device are needed. The applicant must provide a compelling need for the license. It will need to be applied for annually. And then we added a provision about temporary license for special events, where all the provisions would still apply except for that need for a disabilities identification device.
questions on either of those two? Okay, next item, E1, Mike.
Yes, Your Honor. So this is the first reading to change various ordinances to convert from public services to public works. So now that we've taken the time to combine engineering and public service together, it makes sense to change the word. This is more in line with what other cities have. So it clears things up, and then we can focus on infrastructure as part of that. There's a lot of details in the council packet. If you want to go to the next slide. So to get the word out, we'll do a press release. I'll talk about the vehicle branding here in a second, but obviously new business cards, communication material updates, website update, the meeting portal. So instead of engineering and public service on the agenda, we'll have one that's public works. So the first reading would be on Thursday. And what we would propose is to have the second and final reading together and waive that time in between, just so that we can get this done. with suspending the rules. Regarding the vehicle branding, one thing that we've discussed is rather than have a parks vehicle, a public service vehicle, an engineering vehicle, have them all just the city of Marion on the side of them. So say Parks needs to borrow a dump truck, we can just give them a dump truck. We would have small numbers on it, so we would know at Fleet what department that goes to, similar to what Cedar Rapids does. And that way we don't have to write down VIN numbers. We can use that small decal on that. But that way it's, again, Team Marion, bringing it all together, breaking down those silos. We have some trucks that have the old flag. We have some that have different logos, and this way we can be consistent as well.
Okay, questions on that? Yeah, it's about time we rebrand the ones that still have the old, the old flag. So,
I think there might be one more slide, Terrell. And I won't go through it, but this is all the changes in the code. Just taking out basically public service, putting public works, anywhere it says engineering department, changing it to engineering division, and public service director to public works director.
okay, pretty straightforward. Questions? All right. So any questions on E2 through E7? Okay, next one, Dave.
Yes, Ron Major, the applicant at 290 South 11th Street is requesting a waiver of the subdivision regulations to not require the installation of a tree in the front yard as part of the required final occupancy of the home. City code does require a single tree in the front yard to be located between the house and the front property line or sidewalk. In his request, Mr. Major has indicated that the location of the driveway and utilities complicates the ability to locate a tree in the front yard, and he wants to avoid it being right out of his front door. Mike Simpers, the city arborist, did go out and take a quick look at it for me. He did say there was space and there are ornamental trees that would be an option that would fit in that. It would not complicate or conflict with the existing utilities. So he didn't see a reason why it could not be, other than just general aesthetics that Mr. Major is looking to not block the front door. This is on the agenda for approval, but we are recommending denial of the waiver request.
Okay, go ahead. Okay.
So I spoke with Mr. Majors this afternoon because I had some questions about his home that is immediately to the left in this picture. He, Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but he did basically kind of parallel development of this house as well as one immediately to the west, and he owns both. So what is shown on this diagram is, you'll notice the two red lines that go north and then make a turn to the west. And where they make a turn to the west is a utility easement.
Correct.
And so that's cable and electric that are following their approach to the house within the utility easement. And I failed to preface this. I'm thinking as an old utility guy now, stressing the old. In the yellow is the gas line. And they went cross country. They made no effort to follow a parallel path in the utility easement to reach their meter. So my question based on that set of facts is, what is the obligation that we have for utilities to make use of existing utility easements? What are they obligated to in our franchises?
Okay.
Or can they just go hither and yon wherever the heck they want?
Correct. The mains are within, all mains should be hitting those within those easements. I believe what he has indicated here is the actual service lines.
Yep.
From the main, those typically leave the easements as they go to connect to the to the house. So you'll see water, sewer, gas, cable, they'll all leave that easement as they go. Those service lines will leave the easement as they go to the house. So what you're seeing there, that yellow line is a service line from the main that's located within the street right away as part of the franchise agreements.
So I guess what it amounts to though is what I see in terms of the gas line is there was no attempt to avoid conflict in the middle of the effective front yard. And as a former utility guy who used to worry about stuff like this, you know, I had, it was mostly in electric, but I had situations where we had put a power line kind of diagonal across property. And I then had to helpfully instruct line crews to go out and reposition it so it's not in conflict for personal use. And so I don't know if we have, and so this, colleagues, this is my position on the matter, and this one just kind of just bothered me. If we don't have any ability to leverage mid-am to change the pathway of that particular service line to have it parallel the other utility lines that are making use of the utility easement as they approach the house, then I am of the mind to be agreeable to not requiring a tree to be placed in the front yard, because I know long-term and that can be very simply a very negative future conflict that would develop once the root structure is established. And in this case, it's gas, which may pose a differential safety concern versus certainly cable. Electric is problematic too, but I think just the control features on electric are such that I worry more about gas than I do electric. So I'm of the mind that we allow this variance to go forward and not put a tree in the middle there unless we can coerce mid-am to change the path of that line.
I don't think we can coerce them, but the homeowner certainly can ask them to relocate it. That happens. People who are developing property or constructing something frequently will ask the utility company to relocate its service line on the property to accommodate the development or the requirements of the development.
So I think there was an agreement when that was laid out that gas would follow the other utilities, but when the crew showed up, this is what they did.
Oh, goodness, yeah.
And so that's probably an internal compliance issue with mid-am. But I think, so Mayor, I understand, yeah, it's this is with the homeowner to do it. But if he's unsuccessful to do that, or there's a bunch of conflict with the utility, I'm still of the basis, given this situation, to not require a tree to be put there.
So Your Honor, just for a matter of clarification, so the utility easement is going to be similar to, think of our sanitary sewer system. So the main line or your transmission line is where the actual utility would go. And it has to be in the utility easement, where this line in particular is just to serve this individual home, similar to what it is to your house.
I think we understand that. I think what I heard Grant is saying is that at the time that the service line was put in, there was an understanding that it was gonna follow the easement path and then cut over, instead of cutting diagonally across the yard, that they had agreed that they would do that.
Yeah.
But how often have we made exceptions on the front yard tree? Is it gonna open a door?
The number's so few, I can't tell you a
Yeah.
number, so I'm gonna assume it's very little.
I mean, we don't get those requests.
I don't think we get the requests very often.
I mean, I'm just wondering, is this gonna open a door to a flood of them, or?
We do have a lot of inquiries. People just don't want a tree in the front yard. We tell them it's required. you know, they do it, whether they take care of the tree or not, it's kind of up to the homeowner after the fact, but I can only think of a handful of requests maybe in the last 25 years that we've done these, and it's very few and far between, so.
And have they had like a justifiable reason in the past years from your recollection, or did
I don't recall.
They just didn't want a tree?
They just didn't want to tree. I think it was
So, I
just
mean,
purely aesthetics.
there may be a differentiator there.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, go ahead.
So Dave, I understand the problem with the diagonal line of that. How deep is that gas line? And then you talked about there's alternative trees that I'm assuming don't have as deep a root system as maybe other trees. So can you speak to those 2 points?
I can't speak to the depth of an average service line, gas line into the house.
Or
Probably
can Mike?
36. It's a fairly small line. I mean, as long as he stays a couple feet away from it, he could still plant a tree.
Now, in terms of tree styles, you obviously have a couple different types of tree varieties. And I can't say specifically, but you have ones that have more of a tap root that go down. And you have the others more traditional spread that I think we're mostly familiar with. Talking to, again, the city arborist, he said there's plenty of varieties and he could provide some recommendations that would provide that. Should the council require the tree to go in.
As long as we've got a recommendation list from the city arborist that will accommodate that, I'm fine to deny it as you recommended.
Any other questions? Okay, everyone, good with what's been said, and then can make a decision by Thursday? Okay. Thank you. All right, that brings us to the closed session.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the closed session regarding real estate transactions and litigation as permitted under section 21.51J and section 21.51C of the Code of Iowa. These are two separate matters.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn the closed session regarding real estate transactions and litigation, two separate matters as permitted under Iowa Code. May we have the legal counsel statement, please?
Thank you, Your Honor. I have reviewed the proposed subject matter for the closed session and find the same to be appropriate under Iowa Code Section 21.51J and 21.51C.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion before we vote? May we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Jensen,
Yes.
Mr. Harper,
Yes.
Mr. Miskman,
Yes.
Mayor Abu-Osley,
Yes.
Ms. Menzer,
Yes.
Mr. Brandt.
Yes.
Thank you. We are now adjourned to closed session. We'll see everyone on Thursday.